ground swimming. What is it? Ground swimming is a trick where we, in Thai 1 specifically, we end up swimming, but on the ground. So we are in a swimming state, but we are not in the water. We're not in a body of water. It's really useful because swimming is a lot faster than walking, and there's no other movement tech in Thai, really, other than maybe biting off of ledges. So we want to be swimming as much as we can in every category, pretty much. There are some problems with this. You will be pulled out of it in several situations. So you'll be pulled out of it if you go over water, if you go too high off the ground, which is dependent on the level and some other properties about the water that you're in. If you go into a different animation, that can also trigger it. So there are 2 types of swims that are important. There is the out of water swim and there's the basic ground swim. The basic ground swim is really simple. The idea is you are against a wall, you're running into the wall, you jump and you dive. And as long as you land in water, you will keep a swim and you will be swimming and you can swim along the ground. If I go too high, I will lose the swim and then I jump out of it. Okay, so why does this happen? Why does this weird swimming thing happen when you dive against a wall? It's actually really easy to explain, and we proved it using 2up and Blender. So if I pull Blender up, so what we did is we pulled all the levels into Blender, and we pulled the water planes in as well. So I pulled everything in to check what's going on. And it turns out that if you look at the water plane, in every spot where you can get a swim against a wall, the water plane is extending through the geometry. So basically what's happening is, if this is Thai, if there's water in front of Thai, when Thai jumps, like a line will be drawn forwards to see where or what's in front of Thai. And if it detects that there's water in front of Thai, it will go, oh, sick, that's cool, we can dive. If it hits a wall, then it will go, nope, we can't dive here because we've hit a wall. So it will just, like, if there's a wall here, it will draw forwards, it will hit the wall and it will stop. And it will go, nope, there's collision there, you can't dive. You shouldn't be able to dive. There's no water for you to dive into. However, you'll notice that I've been drawing the line from here, even though Thai's here, because what seems to be happening is, rather than it being drawn directly from Thai, it's drawing a little bit in front of Thai. So if Thai's hitbox, like if the wall is right in front of Thai, his hitbox might be poking a little bit through the wall, so this line will start to be drawn from the other side of the wall, which means that it will detect the water because there's nothing in the way. So if there was other collision in the way, like another wall, then it still wouldn't work. But what we did is we checked every swim spot in 2up that we know you can get a swim on, and we found that there is, let me just hide stuff. There is an interesting swim spot. So this one is Spike Swim. We use it in any percent, or top runners use it in any percent. On this half of the wall, we found that you can only do it like here. This side of the wall, it doesn't work. You can do the dive, but only on this half of the wall. If you look at the water plane, you can see it extends beyond. Like if we switch the other side, it extends beyond, but only on that side of the wall. So it turns out you want to be facing that way as much as possible. And this happens in every position where we found a swim. Caged found a swim here, and there is water extending out. So in every position where the water plane extends out beyond the wall, you can get the dives. That's how we found out about that. And we even started theorizing about new swims, like because this water plane just extends all the way through this wall. We theorized about swims on this wall, and yes, you can swim anywhere on this wall. So that's how the dive swims are working. They are very, very simple. As long as you have water on the other side of the wall, there's no other collision in the way, and the game thinks Thai is in front of water, then it will let you dive. And as long as you land in water, you will keep the swim. Nice and simple. Out of water swims are a lot more complicated and really hard to explain, but I will do my best. So out of water swims happen, and they get their name because of swimming out of the water. So instead of diving into water, you are swimming out of the water and you just keep the swim onto the land. So if I go into bridge, there's a really easy one in bridge, and I dive into the water and I turn around and I swim up this way, I should keep a swim. So there, I was in the water, I swam out onto the land and I kept the swim. So we're not 100% certain on how these work, but we know enough about them to have a really good understanding. There is another level, Snow Worries, where we have known about this sort of swim for a while because Lorne found a very strange swim as one of his first findings in the community. It's called lawn swim after lawn, and it is very, very difficult. But the thing that we noticed is that your position starts to move up in certain spots around where the swim is possible. So Aquamity, the TA runner, is very, very, very good at these swims. Did a lot of searching for new swims in this area and found basically every single spot, bar like 1 or 2 that we found since, where you are able to get swim around the holes in the ice in the water. We looked at each of these spots, and it turns out that Ty's position when swimming directly into those spots on the wall moves up very, very, very slightly. A little bit hard for me to show you. Basically, if you swim into this section of the wall in very specific spots, Ty's position will move up very, very slightly, and that's important. So we started to look at other levels, like Bridge, again at the start, or Cass's Crest is another really, really useful one, because there is a swim right at the start on this wall, and we noticed that, yep, Ty's position, you can even see it visually here. You can see Ty shifts up very, very slightly. So Ty's position is being pushed up when he hits this wall, and that's important. Because what we think is happening is that you are bypassing the top of the water. In Ty, water can be done in 2 ways. You can have a water plane, which is just a straight line of water that Ty can jump into and dive out of, whatever. And then you also have a water volume, which sits underneath the water plane, and it's like a big cube of water. And basically, the top of the water plane acts like a normal water plane. What we found is that if you dive into a water plane and then swim out the side or the bottom of the water plane, as long as there is land below you, you will always, in every single case, keep a swim. So the first theory was that these out of water swims are happening where we like managed to swim just barely out of the side, but we checked that in Blender and that cannot be happening. So instead, what we think is happening is the water plane on top, which there's always a second object, like a second water plane that just sits on top of the water volume. We are somehow bypassing the water plane. We're somehow bypassing the detection that says you've hit the top. And we pair this with the idea that when you swim into certain sloped walls, you get pushed up very slightly. So if you imagine there's like a sloped wall here, Ty swims into the sloped wall, gets pushed up slightly, and because of that like minute push up that happens like between frames, you skip the entire water plane and you've just stayed on land. So you're now connected to this sloped ground. However, there's one weird thing that we still can't explain. Imagine for a second that this is the water edge and you've got like sloped ground coming down here. We're looking facing the sloped ground. So it's like slopes up that way. Okay. And then you have like a piece of geometry to the side. For some reason, there has to be a piece of collision to the left or to the right of where you get the swim. In almost every single case. We don't know why, we just know that there does. It might be that you're actually keeping the swim on this side geometry and that the slope is just pushing you up out and you're not keeping the swim off of that, but we don't know. So ideally you want to be as perpendicular, so at 90 degrees, as possible to the slope with something on your left. Think back to Bridge at the start. The way I teach the swim is to say you want to aim for a specific plank on the ground. You want to aim for this plank, and that's actually because it's connected to this post, and this post has collision. So we're actually trying to stay as perpendicular at 90 degrees to this sloped wall in front of us here, with a collision on our left, which is the bridge. And as long as you do that, you will keep the swim. This is also possible in Crikey. If we go into this tunnel and stay to the right inside the tunnel, then when you swim up, you can often just keep a swim here. Yep, there you go. We had a sloped wall. If I go back in, we had a sloped wall in front of us and we were keeping the collision on our right in this case. Speed can also play into this. So in some cases, in a lot of cases with out of water swims, you want to be swimming as fast as possible into the slope. And tides can also play a huge role in this. It's much, much easier, counterintuitively, to get an out of water swim on a level without tides. Bridge has the most out of water swims of any level, and it is tideless. It has no tide at all. Snow has no tide. There's a lot of swims, but they're not easy, and we'll get into that in a second. Shipwrecks has a lot of them, but they are very difficult and inconsistent, and that is very likely because of the tide. We haven't tried removing the tide and doing the out of water swims properly. They're still a bit inconsistent. It's a very, very weird one. But yeah, that's the idea. What's going on with lawn swim? Because if you know about lawn swim, you know that what we're essentially doing is we have this big hole in the ice and we're like trying to aim like parallel to the wall. We're trying to be as parallel to the wall as possible so that if you imagine it as like an octagon will do. Octagon. So if we imagine like a really badly drawn octagon, what we're trying to do is keep a swim by swimming up out of the water and like hugging the edge, hugging the wall, and then swimming out at one of these spots where tide gets pushed. So what I think is happening personally, and this is a theory at this point, but this is the only way I can make sense of it and relate it to the other out of water swims because they are all the same in my opinion. The collision that is to the side of Tai and the wall, the sloped wall that you are trying to swim up onto are exactly the same. It's the same wall. But this doesn't work because if you remember my explanation, you want to be as perpendicular to the sloped wall as possible and also as parallel to the wall to the left or right as possible. So you want to be swimming into a corner basically. But if that's the same wall, then you have to have a very, very strange angle coming out. So the collision on the side is really important, but you also need to make sure you're swimming into that sloped portion. And because the sloped portion is so tiny in snow on every single wall, and because you are trying to use the same wall, you know, like 45 degrees-ish, it's weird. It makes it a really, really, really tricky swim. There's some other really cool swims. Let me just go over those. Any object that has collision can also be used to get a swim. So we have the Frosties, which give you an ice platform, and these platforms can be used to get swims. So we can do a dive onto an ice platform, and then we can keep it off. I didn't keep that one, but you can keep the swim off of the ice platform. There we go. And also, if the ice platform falls in the correct way, you can use it as if it is a wall that would push you out of the water plane. So remember, we're trying to bypass that water plane. If we swim underneath one of these ice platforms and it pushes us in the right direction, we can get pushed out of the water plane and up onto land. It's a bit hard in this spot because the slope isn't big enough on the ground, but it can happen. It might work if I push the platform out a little bit further. That's too far. I think there's probably good. Give this one more go. If I don't get it, I'll just move on. But yeah, okay, fine. But yeah, you can use those to push you out. Seahorses is another really good one. So if we go and grab a seahorse quickly, we'll just grab a seahorse and take it to some land. We are trying to land so that we land on the seahorse. That's the idea. So we're trying to make it so we land on the seahorse like that, and then we can keep the swim out onto land. They are really useful, really cool. You can get a swim almost anywhere as long as you have a seahorse, and there is water. Final type of swim, which they are really, really sketchy and very, very rare, is coast swims. So coast swims, the idea is that you are jumping from one side of an island to another, and you are jumping on towards the coast. But you dive so that Tai thinks there's water in front of him, and you get pushed onto land. And then when you're on the land, you no longer have that. You're no longer in the water. So there's one here where you would dive from this side of the land over to the other. And if you land in just the right way, you can land so that you get pushed out of the water and onto land. They're really sketchy. I'm not going to sit and try this for ages, but this is the idea. You would jump from one side to the other, and then you keep the swim. And the final thing to talk about really is swim maintains. So swim maintains happen when you get a thunder egg or a collectible, and you have a swim at the same time. And the best example of this is in Walk in the Park. So what we can do is hold on to a swim through a cutscene. This is probably the biggest mystery at the moment about swims. This is the thing we know the least about, is why in some cases you can keep a swim and why in other cases you can't. I am of the opinion that the reason why only some swims work is all to do with height. It's how far you are off the ground when you are given the thunder egg. So there's a really, really specific set of moves that you have to do to keep the bats. And it's really strange. We're not sure why. This is why it's such a big mystery, is because we have no idea why this specific motion always works. We're going to lose the swim about here and walk out this side of the cave. And then when we get another swim and we take it back up to the top, for some reason this set of movements means that we will always be able to keep a swim out of this. All we have to do is hit the bats and hold the scope button, whatever your scope button is. As long as you hold it, you will keep the swim, and you can just maintain the swim through the Thunder Egg. The reason I think it works is because in this case, the Thunder Egg is low enough to the ground that when Ty collects it, because he's low enough to the ground, it thinks he's connected to the ground, so it allows him to keep the swim. It doesn't explain why it only works for that really specific set of movements, but it does kind of go towards explaining why. If you did this on the Octopus mission in Rex Marks the Spot, for example, you can visibly see after the Thunder Egg animation, Ty falls like quite a bit of a distance, and you can see like him come out of the swim animation. So I'm pretty sure that's why swim maintains don't work in some cases. And this is what points me towards height. What I've done is the Snow Mountain Egg in the LV2s, I've moved it down, and then I've got on a swim, and I have tried swimming into it. And if I move it down enough, so it's just barely poking through the floor, I can hold tab and sometimes keep a swim out of it. Otherwise, it's impossible. So I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the height off the ground. Because we've modded it. We've modded a water volume in and proven that you can swim out the bottom of it and always keep the swim. But there is one situation where there's a water volume which doesn't extend all the way to the bottom of the geometry, and you can keep a swim out of it. And it's a really, really, really niche situation. So if we use the Doomerang and then go into Rex's diving, I don't know if that will work. Let me try again. Do I have to be in the Doomerang thing? I might have to. Yep, there we go. Okay. And then once you fall, this water volume does not extend to the bottom. So if I just swim out the bottom, and then yeah, there you go. We're now keeping an out of water swim. And you can tell because there's no blue background, you can tell we're not in water right now. And if I swim up, I lose the swim. So this is the ground, and the water volume is above. Yeah, if I swim towards the land, and I just swim down, and then swim out, and boom, we're at the bottom of the water volume. And yeah, you can just keep the swim. So that is the only place that proves in the game, vanilla, without modding, that you can swim out the bottom of water volume. And it's really cool. I love it.